Hey there guys, Conceptual Concept 6.9 here, and you'll notice the atmosphere is a little different. That's because we're at my house, and I feel it pertains pretty well to what we're going to be discussing today, which is home defense gun options. There are four big ones I'd like to address that have been kind of the big four I've sold over the years working in the gun industry, and I thought it might be good to go over the pros and cons and kind of help people who are kind of on the fence of different options, maybe help them steer towards the one that's best for them. Now, we're not going to be answering which one's the best today because they all have their merits, but we'll definitely get into which ones shine in which different situations, households, etc. And lastly, we're definitely going to go over which one I prefer and what I personally keep as a home defense gun. Now, you might choose something else, but this is just based off of my knowledge, my experience, what I want for my household. Let's start with the gun. If you could only have one, which one should you get? I'm just gonna say, should be a pistol. Now, if you are only going to have one, it should be a concealable pistol. So this is my EDC here, Beretta PX4. It's a Glock 19 size. I find I can carry this pretty comfortably all year round, but you'll notice I have a light on it. I'm not as stringent on a light for most people for concealed carry, especially if you live in the city. Most areas are bright enough that you're able to see just fine and see if there's a threat. You can also probably should be carrying a flashlight on body separate from this, just because shining this to figure out what you're looking at is aggravated assault in most states. So it's nice to have, but not necessary for a concealed carry role. But for home defense, I feel it is absolutely a must to have a light on your gun. So you'll see this guy has a light on. I just like having the added feature. This isn't my home defense gun. But going into why you might want one of these. As I said, if you're only going to have one gun, it should probably be something to carry. Pistols are really the only thing you can carry all day concealed, and so it can fit dual roles there. Another benefit of having a pistol is it is very wieldy. So personally, I have kids, and with having kids, I might need to control them in a situation where a burglar's in or someone dangerous is in the household. And it's a lot easier to manipulate and run this firearm one-handed than it is to run any of the other options we show today while you're either maneuvering or controlling your kid, or if you have a toddler or a baby, holding your child and getting them to safety. So this allows you that one-handed use that is honestly superior to all the other ones. Some of them can be pushed into that, but again, not ideal. This is really designed to be shot one or two-handed and very easy to do so. So huge benefit there. Now, one of the bigger downsides to running a handgun is typically they're not as reliable suppressed. Now this is a pretty minor downside, whether a suppressor is or isn't part of your home defense plans or guns or anything like that, but it is something to note. Another thing, which this is probably the biggest reason this is kind of a subpar option, is that capacity is pretty meh. You're with a compact handgun, you're at about 15 to 17 rounds, full size 17 to 18. You get a stendozine, yeah, you can have more capacity, but it is a stendozine. Other thing is, ballistically, these are pretty inferior. Handguns are a tool of convenience. They are not what you want to bring to a gunfight if you can help it. And since you are in your own castle, your own home, you get to pick the gun you fight with, right? So handgun definitely has some pretty severe downsides. There are cases of people getting shot 14, 15, 16 times with a 9mm and continuing to fight back. Ideally, someone's invading your home, putting you and your family at risk. You want to get them to stop what they're doing as fast as possible. Ideally, they'll run, but if they don't, you want it to end as quickly as possible, and this is probably not the best option there. Another thing with handguns is shooting them requires a pretty decent amount of skill and training, and it's a perishable skill. So these are the hardest out of everything listed to shoot well, And so another note there, depending on the size of your house, the distances you might need to take a shot, this just might not be up to snuff, especially if you're not training regularly. But I digress. I really like this option. I think if you're only to have one gun, it should be this, and it can fill all the roles, but it definitely has its shortcomings there. So next on the list is a PCC of some sort. This is my Kalashnikov USA KP9 RIP. Love the company they started out at, just hate the company they ended as. But PCCs have their own unique niche. Personally, I really like these. You get a lot more capacity than a pistol. You have a much more easy to shoot and easy to shoot accurately gun. Recoil management is much better as well. Keeping on target, hitting specific points at decent ranges is definitely doable with something like this. And you'll notice at the end here, I really like the idea of a suppressor. I think they should be on any weapon that can reliably take one for home defense. So a lot of people will say that they want it loud. They want to notify the neighbors that something is going down at their house, so that way the police can come as quickly as possible. And they also want it as a deterrent. It really depends on how determined your home invaders are to do you harm. So personally, I think the benefits of a suppressor far outweigh the downsides. A lot of people think only in the moment of the actual incident, but hearing afterwards, being able to take commands, because police will show up, they will be telling you what to do. They don't know who the bad guy in the house is. So you want to be able to listen to those commands clearly and respond to them. As well as if you have a family, you don't want to blow everyone's eardrums out immediately, because if you need to command or communicate with them, tell them where to go, what to do, you don't want to be screaming and hoping they can hear you after their eardrums just got blown out. Not as big of an issue with 9, but with the short-barreled 5.56 or something like that, much bigger issue. So I definitely like running suppressors. As I said before, every home defense gun should have a light. I've got a red dot on here. Now let's get into the downsides of the PCC, because this is the quietest option, especially if you're running subs. It gets stupid quiet, but let's get into the downsides. The downsides are kind of the same as the pistol in terms of stopping power. This is definitely the weakest of all the options, but you got 30 rounds of rock and roll. So those are really the pros and cons to the PCC. These are also lighter, so it is the second easiest to be able to use your second hand to control your children. If you need to pick up a toddler or a child and get them to safety, you're still able to kind of maneuver this to a degree and shoot it fairly well. So I don't think this is discounted. This did get the lowest vote in my poll that I put a few weeks back, which it got 12%. I can understand that, especially when other options are available. And we'll get into the next option and go over the pros and cons of that. It's really hard to argue that this beats out the next one. So next on the list will be a carbine of some sort. We're gonna stick to 5.56. I know 7.62 by 39 and 300 Blackout are really neat cartridges, but over penetration is a thing, and unless you live in the country where you really don't have to worry about your neighbors, probably not a good idea. 5.56, the benefit of that is there are a lot of rounds that really do incredibly well and not over penetrating. Frangible rounds, you've got the 77 grains actually deteriorate pretty quick. Now nothing deteriorates quick in drywall, but hopefully you're hitting some dressers and some other stuff on the way out. But without further ado, let's get into the 5.56 gun. Benefits of the 5.56 is, I just went over the over penetration. It probably penetrates less than a 9mm ball round. So big benefit there. It is much more powerful than a 9mm, much less powerful than the 308, but much more powerful than a 9mm. You get good capacity. It's very light recoiling, very accurate, easy to keep shots in place. And one thing I forgot to mention with all of this is you are responsible for every round fired. So ideally you want to be hitting the bad guy. You don't want to miss at all. So accuracy is definitely a benefit there. Again, very controllable. This guy is suppressed, as I mentioned. I want to be able to hear police commands and communicate with my family. It would really suck on your worst day of your life for you to survive the fight only to get shot by the cops because you can't hear them. So definitely like the suppressor. As you can see, it has a white light. This one has a little ghetto aim point cap on it. So another upside to this and the PCC is if you're a little more recoil sensitive, if you're not as familiar with firearms, these are much easier to handle, shoot well and accurately than the pistol or the shotgun. So huge benefits there, especially if you're passing one off to a family member that does not shoot as much. Like my wife, she doesn't shoot a ton, and if I'm gonna hand her something, I'm gonna either hand her this or a PCC. Just the way it works. Much easier for her to be able to put rounds on target and defend herself and our children. So another benefit to the AR platform or any like modern carbine and 5.56 is you have a plethora of different magazines. It's easy to get drums, extend that capacity, all that good stuff. And it's America's rifle. So if you only have 2 guns, I personally think you should probably get a 5.56 carbine and a pistol. So this definitely fills the role. It works really well. Now let's get into a couple of the cons here. One of the big ones, if you're not running suppressed, this is going to be the loudest of all the options. So expect some blown eardrums. And definitely be very careful when the police actually do arrive. So another downside to this is they've done studies on different home defense scenarios, and you're much more likely to get convicted and looked at as a little bit more of a bad guy if you use something like this. And I really should have mentioned the PCC as well in a home defense scenario. A lot of people, which I don't necessarily agree with this, but you have to understand not everyone's gun people, but a lot of people look at this as overkill. So they see you use this in a home invasion and they're like, why? You know, he just bloodthirsty, oh my god. No, it's because it's probably one of the best tools for the job. So now that we've gotten all the pros and cons out of the way of the AR-15 or the 5.56 carbine, let's go ahead and move on to the last but not least of the big 4, which is the shotgun. This guy has some of the biggest ups and downs of all of the different guns provided today, and I really wanted to go over it. So the shotgun is a man stopper. We're going to go ahead and insert a clip from Clint Smith saying what he says. It's a famous quote.
Shotguns at the right range with the right load will physically remove a chunk of shit off your opponent and throw that shit on the floor.
So, like he said, shotguns remove a piece of shit from your opponent and drop it on the floor. So there's a lot of hate coming from this. It is a man stopper, and that is really where this guy shines. Now, the spread is something I hear a lot of people talk about pretty adamantly. You don't have to aim a shotgun. That's not true. It's been debunked. There are dozens of videos. I'll go ahead and leave a card for just one showing why you actually do need to aim a shotgun and you can't just point in the general direction. And if that was the case with this gun, it would be a terrible home defense gun. Because like we mentioned earlier, you are responsible for every single round that comes out of your gun. And if it hits a bystander, if it harms someone other than the intended target who is putting threat on your life, right? You're responsible for that. So you don't want it to spread too much, which gets into, in my opinion, a strength and weakness, the spread. Depending on the size of your house, you're going to want to pattern your shotgun loads because different loads act differently through different barrels, even in the same gun. So 2 Mossberg 500s like this could pattern completely different with the same buckshot load, but you don't want it to spread too much. You don't want it to spread wider than a torso at the longest distance in your house. Another thing is double-aught buck does over-penetrate quite a bit. Pretty well noted on that. The FBI actually really leaned into number 4 buckshot, which is like a 25 caliber pellet, and you get a lot more of them because they just don't penetrate as much. But again, the winner here, what this does that none of the other ones do is they're a showstopper. It's pretty much a guaranteed one-shot stop with decent loadings. So another big pro to this gun, which I definitely want to mention, is you can get into one of these incredibly cheap. It's probably the cheapest option available of the list for a reliable, solid gun. The Maverick 88, the Mossberg Maverick 88, is basically this same gun. The action's the same with a few cost-cutting measures, and those are always under 300 bucks. This guy is a Mossberg 500, and I got it at a pawn shop for really, really cheap. So keep your eyes open for that as well. This was cheaper than a Maverick tip. Now the shotgun also is looked at typically as the least dangerous outside of, I believe the pistol is kind of in the same ballpark, but these are looked at as less tactical and less, you know, dangerous for the courtroom. So shotgun definitely lends itself well to if you survive your defensive scenario and you have to go to court. Having this will hurt you less than having an AR-15 or a PCC. So let's get into some of the cons, because past that, I think there are a lot of cons. One is this is a working man's weapon. This guy has an 8-round tube. One in the chamber, I have 9 rounds. It has the least capacity out of any gun here. Now again, it is a showstopper, so you hit one of those, it's pretty significant. But let's say there's multiple attackers and they're determined, because there are more than one case of groups of people coming in homes. 9 rounds might not be enough, especially if you miss a few of them. So one big downside of the shotgun is most of them are not drop safe. You see this safety here? This is a trigger block safety. It does not block the hammer from dropping. And when you drop the gun, it can skip the sear and drop and fire the gun. There are multiple videos of this. I'm gonna go ahead and insert one. Gun fired without being touched, and that's just an inherent risk of the shotgun. So it's for that specific reason that I carry mine cruiser ready, which is action unlocked, chamber empty, full magazine tube. So why do I do that? Because if for some reason this were to drop and there's no bad guy, I don't want to leave a giant hole in the wall, best case scenario, and I don't want to accidentally hurt someone that I really don't want to hurt, is worst case scenario. So you just pump the action and you're good to go. Now, we've all heard people say pumping the action will scare them off. Yes and no. So again, this gets into how determined are your attackers, because if you're hopped up on meth, if you're, you know, super cracked out, are you going to care about that noise? Probably not. And so you can't rely on that rack. I know it can work, and I'm not denying it can, but it is not a guarantee. So let's just get that out of the way. So next up on cons for this is it is a complicated weapon system to run. Out of everything here, you can leave all the other guns, your PCC, your pistol, your AR-15, you can leave them loaded with a round in the chamber. All you do is flick that safety off and you go to town. So this gun, for instance, is much more complicated. You've got to pump after every single round fired, and once you run out, reloading is also more complicated. Now you can get those AR-10 style shotguns, and some of them do work very well. But the most common is the tube-fed shotgun, and it is a working man's gun. You only have between 5 and 8 rounds in the magazine tube. So once you run out, you've got to single load into the tube, or you can double load if you're really, really good. If you're not, might not be the best option. Also, you're gonna have a significant amount more recoil, especially with the 12 gauges. Just an issue you might have. And, well, let's be honest, a lot of people aren't up to the recoil of a 12 gauge. So I wanted to add, regardless of all the cons of the shotgun, it is an absolute man stopper. And if you get proficient with it, if you get really, really good with it and kick some ass, this is hard to beat. Out of the entire list, this guy is the one-shot stop, and it is meta once you get really, really good with it. So with all that being said, what is my go-to gun for home defense? It's the least popular of the bunch, actually. So it is a PCC. Really what drives that isn't that this is my preferred for defending my home alone. It is because this is my preferred for defending my home with my family in it. Because I might need to be able to hold one-handed and fire relatively accurately. This guy's light enough, I'm able to, you know, hold a child or lead a child, anything like that. It's also quiet enough that I can definitely communicate with my family no matter how many rounds I've fired. So it is kind of my go-to. Least popular for sure, but it's personally what I lean towards. My close second, which usually I use this to fight my way to my PCC, is my Beretta M9A4. This has been an incredibly reliable pistol. Again, I want to be able to use it one-handed, and that is a driving factor for me having a home defense gun. Because I have children in the house and I need to be able to handle that appropriately, because I can't just hole up in my room like a lot of people recommend, and those people probably don't have children, because if someone were to break in, I gotta go make sure they're safe. So end of the day, those are my picks. Let me know what your picks are down below, because we all have different opinions, but those are the big 4 home defense guns as I see them, and my personal preference to which one I gravitate towards. So no matter what you picked, make sure go train, be proficient with your firearms, and don't forget to go outside, touch grass, and eat ass. All right, guys?